I want to spend a few minutes this morning. Actually, let's pray first. Father, we just want to give you thanks. It's good to come and worship, and it's just good to be together as a family, to just kind of put life on hold for a few minutes. I just thank you for the praise we could have, for the prayers we've offered, for the love and the handshakes, the welcome this morning. Now I just ask that you would bless us with your presence as we look at your word, and then hear from our Corinto team, and then finish the service this morning with communion. Lord, just bind us together this morning and speak to us through the power of your Spirit. In Jesus' name we ask that prayer. Amen. I want to finish up our series. For the last 3 weeks, we've been, for the month of February, we've been looking at a series that I just entitled A Month of Love. And each week we've been looking at the Great Commandment. There's two greats in the New Testament, the Great Commandment, the Great Commission. The Great Commission is to go into all the world and make believers, right? Baptize them into the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then there's the Great Commandment, which is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So week one, we looked at what does it really mean to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, right? It's being all in. It's the four components of who we are, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, being all in and loving God with all of that, with our every heartbeat, loving God 24/7 with everything we've got. And then the second week we looked at, and it's so easy to forget about, love your neighbor as yourself. Who's my neighbor, right? And when do I step in? When don't I step in? What's my responsibility? And who is it that really needs my help? And to what limit do I help them? And I appreciate some of the feedback that I got from that message, because it really helps us understand that, you know what, anybody that's around us that's in need is our neighbor. And it's so easy to overlook some things. And we don't have to do everything, but if we can just do some things. And we took some lessons that morning from the story of the Good Samaritan. And then last week we looked at what it means to really love ourselves. It's hard to get along with ourselves sometimes, much less love ourselves. And if you've missed any of those, I really want to encourage you to listen to them, either the audio through our website or catch the video through YouTube. And I think it's good. And the reason I say that we should listen to these is because if it's the great commandment, if that's the greatest thing of all, and you look at the context of when Jesus said those words, if that's the greatest commandment of all the commands that are in the Bible, then I think we're going to be held accountable for that one day. And I don't know about you, but if that's what we're going to be held accountable for, I want to make sure that I live to the fullest in obeying that commandment. Now this morning, I want to look at an example of what that might look like when you put them all together, okay? Looking in the New Testament, we're going to look at Hebrews, just a short text, and this is from that famous chapter on heroes of the faith, Hebrews chapter 11. We're going to look at verses 8 through 10, and it's a brief story of Abraham. This is what we read. It says, it was by faith, okay? It was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as an inheritance. He went without knowing where he was going. And even when he reached the land God promised him, he lived there by faith. For he was like a foreigner living in tents, and so did Isaac and Jacob, who inherited the same promise. Abraham was confidently looking forward to a city with eternal foundations, a city designed and built by God. In just a few minutes here, I want to pull out several things of what I think it means to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself in the context of an individual who did that well. I want to look at the life and example of Abraham from just those 3 short verses. What does it really look like? What really happened? How do you love God, love your neighbor, and love yourself? What does that look like in the context of faith when you're all in, if you will? 5 things rather. The first was this: Abraham was in a relationship. And I'm going to move through these kind of quick. But if you're using YouVersion or if you got your Bibles, maybe circle some of the words that are highlighted here on the screen. Number 1 is Abraham had a relationship with God. Twice in that text it says it was by faith. Abraham walked with God. Abraham knew God. He had a daily relationship with God. There was an intimate relationship with his Creator. He knew who was giving him life. He was in relationship. It wasn't an in and out relationship. It was a constant relationship. They were in communication with each other. How do we know that? Number 2 is this. Abraham was in a position to listen. If you go back and you look at that text that says, it was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home. When God called Abraham to leave home, Abraham was in a position to listen, wasn't he? When God called Abraham, listen, he heard. He put himself in a place where in this relationship, he was within earshot, if you will. He knew when God was calling him and he listened. The third thing is Abraham was obedient. It says when God called him, he went. By faith, he listened. God called, he went. That's pretty simple, isn't it? He went. He went where? He went to a foreign land, a place he had never been, a place where he didn't know the people. He didn't know what the conditions were going to be. He didn't know what life was going to look like. But he had faith in God and was in a position to listen to God. When God called, he went. Maybe with a lot of questions, but it doesn't say he went hesitantly or reluctantly. It says he went. Number 4 is he went trusting. Perhaps it was uncomfortable or unfamiliar, but he went and he lived in a foreign land. He lived by faith. And he gave up the comforts of his home to live in a tent. The 5th thing when you look at this text is Abraham was confident of his future. It says, and it says that in verse 10, it says, Abraham was confidently looking forward to a city with eternal foundations. Abraham was looking at the present, but he was focused on the future. Does that make sense? He was dealing with the present, the conditions, the challenge, the unknown, but his sights were set on the confidence of heaven. If he obeyed, he had the blessings of a better life now and heaven later. He was confident of his future. And the result of that, number 6, was Abraham was blessed. You know the song, Father Abraham had many sons, right? He was the father of many nations. Abraham was blessed for his obedience. I ran through that very fast. But what am I challenging you to in that short text? What does the text challenge us to? I don't think that it was only Abraham that God called to live by faith and to put himself in a position to listen and to be obedient when God called him to go, and to go in confidence to a place that was unfamiliar and uncomfortable, and to live there with the unknown, but to be focused on what was known, the future in heaven. I don't think that's a call just for Abraham. I think that's a call for every one of us. That's an example of what it means to love God unconditionally. To live in the present with a lot of uncertainty, but focused on a future with absolute certainty, huh? That's what it means to be all in, to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor even when you don't know your neighbor. Maybe not even having met your neighbor, maybe going somewhere to find out that your neighbor's not anything like you, but to live with them and make a difference in the land the Lord your God puts you. And to be able to love yourself because you've loved God and you've loved your neighbor, and the blessing comes back to you. Do you get that? And that's just one picture. Why do I choose Abraham? Because Abraham is listed in the heroes of the faith. When you look at that chapter of Hebrews, chapter 11, these giants of the faith, so to speak, these heroes of the faith, and I hesitate to call them giants of the faith, even though they were giants of the faith, because you know what? You and I can do the same thing. Because if you look back at the beginning of the text, it says, how did Abraham live? It says, Abraham lived by faith. What are you and I called to live by? Certainty or faith? You and I are called to live by faith, aren't we? We don't know what's going to happen today or tomorrow, but I know what's going to happen one day. One day I'm going to stand before my Lord and Creator in heaven, and He's going to say to me, and I really believe He's going to say to me, how did you do when it came to that, loving me with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself? Did you really live by faith, or did you have to have all the answers? Or could you trust me when I called you into the unknown? Could you trust me when I called you into the uncomfortable? Could I count on you when I called you to do something you didn't want to do? I don't know about you, but I want to hear the words, well done. Well done. Good and faithful servant. You and I are called to be servants. It's difficult to think we can live up to Abraham's example. But when I thought about this over the past week, there were 18 people who went to Honduras who did exactly what Abraham did. They lived by faith. They were in a position to hear from God when God called them to go into a foreign land and live in tents. This morning I want them to come in and I want them to share their experience from their trip. So will you welcome the kids back in, and let's welcome the Corinto team back this morning, will you? And if the Corinto team will come up.
Good morning, inSpirit family. And I do mean family because this is our church family. And it's been just such a wonderful experience to be able to go down and spend time again with our Corinto family. When Lisa first asked us for a volunteer to speak on different subjects, she gave us the list of subjects, and I chose to speak on the people. And that kind of comes natural for me. I'm a people watcher, and I love to watch people. I love to hear stories. The story of who you are, how you came to know the Lord, just a lot of things about you. And many of you probably have been grilled by me over different times. I love stories. And so that I would like to share with you a lot of the stories of what we've found out about our team, but also our Corinto family. I've divided it basically into three different sections. First, the team, and then the staff, and then the Hondurans. The team. We had 18 people, as most of you know. 7 of these were young people, 14 to 18 years old, I think. They worked hard on the projects. You can see the pictures of how hard they worked. They played hard with the kids. And man, when it's almost 100 degrees, it's hard to go running around chasing a soccer ball and football. But they played hard. Also developed with a lot of the kids was a thing called tickle tag, and they'd be chasing them and trying to tickle them, and vice versa. For me, watching the girls was just really interesting this year. It's just, as you can see probably on the picture, most of the girls had long hair. And so I couldn't tell you how many times I saw braiding being done. If you ever need French braids in your hair, talk to Lexi Westra. She's kind of the expert at it. But the Hondurans love that too. Of course, they have long hair, and they love to have their hair braided also. They're worried about their tan lines, and most of us did get a little bit of a tan, but they were really worried about the lines. Me, I could have cared less. I never wore makeup the whole time I was there. And honest to truth, I never even looked in a mirror the whole time I was there. There are no mirrors in the bathroom or anywhere else. There were times when I wished I had long hair so I could have had it braided. It looked pretty good. Then you have the old. That's Don and me. I celebrated my 70th birthday while I was in Honduras. I think you'll see later, probably somebody will talk about the Honduran tradition of having your face shoved in the cake for your birthday. They sing happy birthday, and then somebody takes their hand and shoves your face in the cake. Last year was my birthday also, and I had an eye infection, so I opted out of it, and I was able to designate someone to have their face shoved in the cake for me. And of course, I designated my husband. So he so graciously had that very marshmallowy frosting all over his face. But my point is, it doesn't matter how old you are to go to Honduras. Don and I find plenty to do. The worst part of it is crawling off the floor out of your bug tent is the first thing in the morning. That's kind of hard. So after you really haven't slept real well because of the heat, because the heat continues all night long also. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can still establish relationships with the people. Then there's the in-betweens, which covered most of us, and that reminds me of the energy I used to have. But as you can see from the pictures, everyone pitches in and does things with. It doesn't matter how old you are. The second group of people I want to talk about is the staff. The staff is absolutely incredible. We have Rolando, who's our representative from World Renew, and schedules everything. There's Lara, our representative from the health department, who makes sure our food is up to U.S. standards and works hard with the food staff. And they're just amazing. They're fixing us 3 meals a day, and our lunches were absolutely incredible this year. There's a few of us had a few things to say about our breakfasts and dinners, but the lunches could have carried you through most of the time. So, and it makes me so proud to see the kids who might be picky eaters but never have a complaint about the food, and just go on. And if they're not happy with the tortillas 3 times a day, they'll put some peanut butter and jelly on their tortilla and eat it that way. So that it really makes me proud that they're not complaining about the food. Our translators are absolutely terrific. Early in our planning stage, they told us that the translators, who I believe have been there from the beginning, Carlos and Lucy, would not be able to join us this year. And most of us were very sad about that, because they're just part of our team as far as we're concerned. But World Renew was able to change things around, and Carlos and Lucy were able to join us, and they added someone by the name of Chris, who was fantastic working with us. So we had 3 translators who were busy all the time. The Masons. I so admire the Masons. They're just artists. They know exactly how much water and how much gravel to add to the mixture, and everything is done by hand. It's not like we have this cement mixer that's going round and round. No, you dig your shovel in and you mix all the stuff up. And this year we worked on latrines and floors, and so the Masons are just amazing. Let's see. The patience they have. I can't tell you how many times I heard the different team members say, those Masons have so much patience with us gringos. They are appreciative of the help, but they could have done it probably in twice the time that it took for us to do it. I can't leave this section without mentioning our bus driver, Wilmer. If the picture that you see up there is the gauge in the bus as we were going from Tegucigalpa to Corinto, and if you can see, it was twists and turns, and we're on mountain, and there's no sides, and you couldn't have ever pay me enough to drive that road because of all the twists and turns. But Wilmer did it. And so when you pray for traveling mercies for us in Honduras, we really appreciate those traveling mercies, because it's not the flight there. It's once we get to Tegucigalpa and have to go to Corinto you almost close your eyes sometimes. The third group of people I'd like to talk about are the people of Honduras themselves. And I think Laura said it best. She said, as we take that turn into the corner to enter the village, it was like going home. And that's what it was. Once you see those smiles on the people of Honduras, there's just no adequate way to express how you feel like you're going home. And a lot of us develop our favorites. Pastor Francisco and his wife Ruth, the pastor of the Church of Corinto, Ruth is one of my favorites, and that's mostly because we share a name, and that's a big thing down in Honduras to share a name. So that's always kind of cool. Their daughter Nancy is a doctor, and last year I had the experience of being able to go around with her. Many of you probably know I'm a nurse, and so I find that very fascinating, the health care of the Honduran people. And Nancy and her husband Darwin were not able to be there. Darwin's also a physician, and Nancy's ill health prevented them from being with us this year, and it was a big disappointment for many of us, including me. I'm not always sure about the names of the different people that sometimes, they'll say the name and they'll say it kind of fast, like our representative from the Department of Health. Her name is, I would say Laura, but they call it Lara. And so it's just always a little bit of a different emphasis. So the one lady that I'd like to talk about, though, I think her name is Othelia. She's 80 years old. Last year, we saw her walking with a cane. This year, she did not have to walk with a cane. She was at the church service, and I was able to speak with her with a translator after the service, and she just exuberates joy. And we were so happy that she wasn't walking with a cane. And she said, when I was younger, I used to love to dance. Can't dance anymore, but she said, my bones just ache because I have to go and cut wood every day. And this lady's 80 years old. She cuts wood every day to support her and her disabled son. So maybe her bones ache, but she's out there cutting wood, not me. My very favorite from last year, like I said, we all have our favorites. Mine was a baby. Her name is Valentina, And Carlos, the translator, and I used to fight over her last year. She was 3 months old. She was kind of pudgy. She just was at that age where she'd smile all the time. And if I wasn't holding her, Carlos was holding her. So anyway, she was just adorable. And I didn't see her the first few days that we were there, and I really missed her. And so I asked some of her people, and they came back to me the next day and said, "You were asking about Valentina, and that made her mother so happy, and she'll be here tonight." And that made me happy. But Valentina is no longer a 3-month-old baby. She's now 15 months old, and she's kind of a little stinker. And didn't want to be held by me or Carlos very much. But I think in there somewhere there's a picture of Carlos holding her. So other, favorites that we have, we could all tell you stories about our favorites. The thing that breaks my heart the most is the education of the children. We have 3 young boys that both last year and this year were with us almost constantly. Anytime the team members were at the church, they were with us. They were helping on the job sites. And so I said, how come they're not in school? And there's evidently a very sad story that goes along with these 3 young men, and their mother has basically abandoned them, and they live with their grandmother. School is mandatory, I believe, through 6th grade, but there's no one to enforce that. And so they don't go to school. So that's something that could really be in your prayers, is that somehow the education system can be enforced. But the big thing I did see, and the translator kept saying, their grandmother's raising them, but also the community is raising them. The community comes around them and helps raise them. It will be really interesting to see how God uses them. Are they going to end up being laborers in the salt mines? It's kind of my guess as to what will happen with these young men. My second year on the team is now complete. What was my highlight? I think it was the big thing for me was that we had, seemed like an additional translator. I was able to sit with the people and hear their stories. It wasn't a rush. And just be able to say, what is your story? I actually sat with Pastor Francisco and his wife Ruth for quite a time and heard how Pastor Francisco came to know the Lord 36 years ago, how he was a truck driver before he became a pastor. And his wife came to know the Lord a year later. So those kind of stories are so great to hear. Our last evening with the Honduran church and community was a celebration. And normally when we have the last night, we have a church service. But this year they decided to have a bonfire. And when it's 104 degrees and you have a bonfire, we all kind of looked at each other and we backed our chairs up from the fire. And then there were games like musical chairs and chasing each other around, trying to take a tail off from each other. So just a lot of different games that they had come up with. And then they had the birthday celebration. We had a really good meal, and then the birthday celebration where 4 of us got our faces shoved in the cake, and it was just a time to sit and celebrate. The Vander Arks had a conversation with the two young men. I think you can see the pictures of the two young men that James is with there. The one on, well, it's on my left at the picture I'm seeing there, the taller of the two young men, plays the guitar and just does a wonderful job playing the guitar. And they're teenagers, they're friends. And so one of the questions they asked them, and it's kind of a summation of what I would like to say, is, they basically were asking them, do you see the worth of us coming down here? And their response was, you bring so much joy to this community. And that's truly, we receive so much joy from our time there also. My last morning, I was presented with a gift, and I'd like you all to see my little Valentina. This is my little stinker, who's now 15 months, but I was given this really nice picture to hang on my refrigerator. So thank you for all that you do to send us to Corinto.
Okay, it's fun. Okay, so this year my family and I went down to Corinto, and it was our first year going, so I was asked to talk a little bit about the place as itself. So, a little bit of a preface. If you look up Corinto, Honduras, it's going to tell you somewhere near Guatemala. That's not where it is. So, that's where I was expecting we were going to go. But we were actually at the southernmost tip of Honduras, basically. So it was hot, like very hot. Like I decided it would be fun one day to convert the Celsius to Fahrenheit. And I mean, it was only 107 and we were riding around in the back of pickup trucks. Not that bad. But we luckily had a breeze for most of the week, I'd say. There was one day that was pretty bad, just straight heat, but there was a good breeze blowing, so that was awesome. So what you're seeing on the slide right now is the church that we stayed in. I'm sure you've heard us talking about the mattresses, or lack thereof, and the bug tents, but that, the picture on the right, is how tight of quarters we have there. And yeah, as a first-timer, I found out that the mad scramble into the church is not just excitement. No, it's going in there to get a good spot so that you get fans so that you don't fry when you sleep. So that one's committed to memory. There was actually electricity, so this picture is taken right by one of the fans, but the outlets at the front of the church weren't working. So luckily we had some extension cords, otherwise the people up there probably would have died in their sleep or something. But yeah, it was not good. It was really hot. And then your fan dies in the middle of the night too. So that was awesome. But the next slide has a picture of the bathrooms and what we got to deal with for the week. So the picture on the left is what the whole bathroom system looks like. And you can't really see it, but there's bathrooms like the left and then the right. There's one for each, supposedly men and women's, but whatever. And then there's 2 showers too. But the bathroom, as you can see, is a single little stall with some toilet paper. You don't throw the toilet paper in the toilet. As fun as that is, that was interesting. And then the flush doesn't work either. So you had to go out into the middle with that bucket and then use that. But then the pila, which has the water, sometimes gets really close to empty. So you have to bend in there. I almost fell into the pila, which would have been rather unfortunate. But that's okay. It probably would have been cold there too. Oh well. But finally, I want to talk about a little bit about the community and the homes outside of the churchyard. So there you can see kind of what the people there live in and what their idea of a home looks like. And it's heartbreaking the first time that you see it, and you see these kids coming around the church and like what they're living in. The houses are extremely small, mostly 2 rooms, if that, with a kitchen. But yeah, The kids who live in those homes, though, they're still so filled with joy. It was absolutely insane. Considering like what we have back here at home, we would call that like a shack or something. So that was really eye-opening. But Corinto, it's just a wonderful place filled with so many new ideas to a person who's never been there before. But it's truly life-changing and eye-opening to how other people live and experience everyday life. And if you get the chance to go, I would really recommend you doing so. So thank you.
Good morning. I have the opportunity to talk about some of the projects we did while we were down there. I'll try to keep it short. The first thing I want to say, you see the picture of everybody kind of piled in the back of a truck. This is my second year going, and I thought last year we all worked fantastic together. And this year, this group of young people and younger yet people all worked fantastic. It was amazing. It didn't matter what project we were on. Everybody kind of found their niche, found what to do, how to do it, and we knocked out a lot of projects in what I thought was really good time every day. So that was awesome. We did a lot of floors this year. So I think the next slide has a number of different pictures of floors. I think we did at least one every day, if not two, a couple of the days. That seemed to be a big need this year that they had. We did dig one latrine pit, thankfully the first day, so we got that out of the way. And then the rest of it was finishing the latrines. So, and the pit's already dug, basically building up the walls, putting in the pipe, and then building the outhouse structure for the latrine. And we did a number of those this year too, which is great. The masons do a fantastic job. And so we knocked those out. A couple interesting things this year that on Wednesday morning, myself, Laura, and Lisa had an opportunity to drive around the community with our representative Orlando from World Renew, Lauda, who works with the community from the DN, Dinakania National, which is a partner with World Renew. We were asking some questions earlier in the week because we knew that projects and work goes on after we leave, and some of that is funded by our church family. And so we had an opportunity on that Wednesday morning to drive around, and Lauda brought us to a couple individuals' homes that had received work that some of those funds had been provided through our projects. And I wanted to tell a couple of those stories really quick. The first one that I believe comes up is Myrna. They, as you can see in the picture there, the top left, there's 14 people living in that home right now. And to the right is the start of a structure for a new home. There's a small piece of land that the mother of that current home gave to her daughter. And so they're in the process of building a home for their family of 4. One of the things that will be happening after we left, or may have happened over the weekend, is one of the projects that we're funding after we leave is we will be providing a roof for that home and a floor. And taking a few minutes to hear their story, they have a recycling business, which is a little bit of an interesting business to be in down there, collecting all the plastic and stuff along the roads. And they turn that into generating some money for the family. And they get about 2 limps per pound, which is only about 8 cents in American dollars. But it was really neat to meet with them and knowing that some of the work that we're doing continues on after we leave, whether that's through finance or our prayers. The next story, Oneida. This is kind of this is a little bit of a tearjerker, I think, when you actually see it. The picture in the middle is actually a tarp roof structure, and that is what their roof was a year ago. And what we found out is that on the left is their new roof, which is a metal roof. Prior to that, they had that tarp roof, and when it rained, it would rain so hard inside of their home, they would all crawl into one bed and pull a sheet of plastic over them and sleep that way. So it was one of those that I think we all stood there going, holy smokes, that's not good. So knowing that small gesture from our standards, helping to put that metal roof on now, they don't need to do that. They're a family of 6, the mother and father, and they have 4 kids. They also, their oldest is handicapped. So she's in a wheelchair, and she received a wheelchair last year as well, and that was part of the work through the health program of the DN. So that was really cool to see some of the work that they're also doing. On top of that, their youngest child, we were told that a year ago when the DN came to this family and started working with them, their youngest child was malnourished to the point where she couldn't even walk. And so as the DN worked with the family and helped provide vitamins and other nutrition, when we were there, that little girl was running around and happy as could be. And it was really cool to see some of that work in action while we were down there. So continue to pray for these projects because they continue on even as we leave. Whether it's through financial support, whether it's through prayers, pray for World Renew, the DN. They do monthly checks, well visit checks, and clearly the work they're doing down there is working and it's making a difference. The last thing I want to note really quick is they have a pilot program they're trying down there, and it's aquaponics. They have a rainy season in the fall, and this year, from what we're told, it didn't rain enough. And so there's a pretty big concern as we go into this summertime that there's not going to be enough crops and there could be a shortage of food. And this is always a concern down there to some extent, but it seems like it's a growing, larger concern this year. One of the things that World Renew and the DN has been working on is some grants for these aquaponics programs. Really quick, aquaponics for the most part is there's a tank with some tilapia, which basically fertilizes the water. The water is used on the plants and helps provide a quality plant. That water filters back through, the fish filter out anything bad in the water, and it continues to cycle through. They're relatively cheap to set up. The hitch is that the people that do it need to maintain them. So they have a pilot program in southern Honduras right now. They have 100 of these systems around, 3 of which were in Comito, which is a community right next to Corinto. So we had an opportunity to go see it really quick. Just pray for this program. This could be a possible answer for them and some of the challenges they're going to be up against over the next year to help have some sustainable vegetables and the fish once they're able to harvest, once they're of age as well. So it's kind of a continued system to get them some meat and other nourishments they need. So continue to pray for that and the progress they have.
Hi, my name is Emily, and this is my family's 3rd time. This will be our 3rd time going to Honduras, so I think that's a huge blessing for us. I'm here to talk about God sightings and ways that we could all see God through our week. So the first one I wanted to start with was all the boys around church. So I think Ruth already mentioned it, those 3 boys, but they were constantly around the church. And for us to almost be like a family to them for the week, that's something that really touched, I think, a lot of our hearts. Also, Ruth talked about the tickling too. That was funny. I think for me, seeing my dad tickle a few of the little boys, it was almost like he was being a dad to them. I don't know. That was something special to me. So the next slide has some pictures from Ladies' Night on it. And that was a way for us to kind of serve some of the people from the community in ways that are different than just giving them a new floor or a new latrine. Something special to know that we care for them, not just their houses and their homes, but also for them as people. I'll try and keep this a little shorter. The next slide, that was our farewell service that Ruth also talked about. That was really interactive, and that was a way to get to know the community as a whole, not just separate families. I think that helped us bond and know that we're appreciated. I mean, so this slide and the next one show how we are appreciated by this community. This was our welcome, and these two, like the farewell and the welcome, were both big things for me because getting all these hugs from all the little kids and all the smiles on their faces is amazing to see with how little they have, but how much joy they have. Like, yeah. Their smiles are one of my favorite things and one of the ways I can really see God through them. My last slide was our team bonding. For me, I was able to become closer with our entire team. I think we had a lot of fun this week getting closer to each other and being able to serve a community together, and I think that really brings us all closer together. Yeah, this was a really good week for us all to become a lot closer and to be able to serve together.
I just very quickly want to thank all of you as a church. You've supported us in so many ways. Financially, of course, you helped us all get there. You helped support with the projects. Prayer partners, thank you so much. I needed 18 prayer partners. I got exactly 18 prayer partners. And God matched everybody up in such an amazing way. And you don't know how much it means, other than those of you who have been there before, to have those letters and cards and fun little things that you guys have given us. So thank you to the prayer partners. We thank you. I thank this wonderful, awesome team, which you've already all heard a lot about. It was just a wonderful time, and we thank God for his provisions, for his safety, and we thank him for the wonderful community, and we just do encourage you to continue to pray. If anything sparked in any of you, or you have any questions or think, wow, I should do that sometime, the interest sign-up sheet is on the board. So feel free to head back to the Go board after church. And just if you're interested at all or have any more questions, let us know. So thank you all very, very much.